Mr. Chairman, I'd like to seek a clarification from Mr. Kanjorski or from the chairman. It's my understanding that the SEC, by rule, is exempting companies under $75 million in capital.
The gentleman will yield. Yes, temporarily, not permanently.
All right, so
The difference is the amendment would do it permanently.
all right. So what Mr. Garrett attempts to do is actually establish by statute what is the current practice. So,
Well, the gentleman will yield not, but the current practice is a suspension. So
yes.
it is to make it permanent, make the current practice permanent.
And I guess I'd ask the ranking member, is he opposed to the present practice?
He is.
Sorry, the chairman of the subcommittee. Are you, Mr. Kanjorski, opposed to the present practice of the SEC exempting these smaller companies?
No. The intent of Congress was that all companies comply.
Right.
And it was set up in such a way that this could eventually occur. We have successfully done that 3/4 of what we wanted to accomplish as a Congress. Now, without information, without study, and without evidence, we're totally reversing that course of conduct. I think it sends a terribly unstudied approach to the way we're going to handle and regulate commerce in this country. And I just think it's dangerous. Somebody's going to come up here with, well, let's, as a matter of fact, I get them all the time. I get people saying,
I understand.
I'm a wealthy individual, I should be exempt. You know, have anybody had any calls from wealthy individuals to be exempt? I imagine there's not one sitting member on this committee. Unfortunately, I'm hit with about 50 of them. I've met almost every wealthy family in the United States because they've all concluded that they're not the problem and they should be exempt.
The gentleman yield. I hope they bought dinner. It's the other Alabama's time.
Yeah, still, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe the SEC is probably by exempting these smaller companies. It has, and I think most of us that have served, there is quite a compliance burden on these smaller companies, and I certainly support an exemption for those under $75 million, which I think is the SEC has gone to this approach, and I think that we ought to give some predictability going forward for these companies. So I'm prepared to support it, and I think that Mr. Garrett gets the right balance by at least having the SEC, not this committee, but the SEC, which has some expertise, look at companies between $75 million and $250 million. So, I will say this, the one thing that we're going to have to watch, and I'll close with this, as a company transitions from under $75 million to a larger company, then there could be problems with compliance.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, I will.
If you're going to apply that role of whatever the SEC do, we should do, let me call your attention. In fact, I think Mr. Garrett will bear me up, that the chairman of the SEC does not approve of this amendment, nor does she encourage this amendment. So if we're going to follow that through on the 75 to 250, we ought to follow it on the exemption that's being granted here today. And I agree. Let's use our most expert agency to determine what should be done. Let's get them to do the study. Let's have them make the recommendations.
If the gentleman will yield.
My time is not mine.
Oh, yeah.
Well, odd as it should be that I should be here actually defending the White House in this situation, but I believe it is the White House that understands the importance of going forward with legislation that myself and Mr. Adler are trying to advance here. And just a couple of quick points. It doesn't surprise me that in those discussions where you and I had with regulators, that the regulators were always saying that, no, we need greater control, we need greater control. But what did those regulators find out when they actually went into the industry and find out? And they found a study that was done by the SEC wrote was majority felt that the cost of compliance outweighed the benefits, and this was especially true among smaller companies. And also of the small companies surveyed by the SEC, 70% reported they had considered going private to avoid subjecting themselves to Section 404 requirements. We talk about studies. I was not here when SOX passed. I don't recall any studies being done then to say exactly what the cost would be to all the other companies that we impose this large burden on. SEC we have now had a track record all of these years. These companies haven't failed or caused major problems. I think that Mr. Adler and I are on the right page, absolutely, as is the White House, to say that let's create this exemption now and not cause any more hardship. And I see my time is up. I yield back to
The gentleman from New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me associate myself with the remarks of Mr. Garrett and Mr. Bacchus. We've seen the results of Sarbanes-Oxley. They've been very, very good in some ways. They've been a tremendous burden on small companies that are publicly traded. It has discouraged new companies from going public in our country in a very damaging way for our economy. It's chased companies overseas. We know that's true. The White House knows that's true. The Treasury knows that's true. I can concur with Mr. Garrett. The White House and the Treasury both accept this amendment, help draft this amendment, embrace this amendment, believe it's the right balance between proper regulation and encouraging small businesses through capital formation to grow and create jobs. We know we're in a very deep recession. Our job crisis is very real across this country. This will be one step to creating job opportunities for Americans through the private sector, the healthy, natural way to grow, while maintaining 404A, as Mr. Campbell talked about last week, the internal controls we want from Sarbanes-Oxley staying in place, maintaining the status quo in terms of the SEC's requirement for reporting under 404B. This doesn't in any way dilute existing practice. So I think we should strike the right balance of enough regulation to protect investors, to protect consumers, without so overburdening businesses that they don't grow, that they don't create new jobs, they don't do what the private markets, when they're properly regulated, do well for the benefit of society. I really urge all members to support this amendment, which is also supported by the White House and by Treasury.
And will the gentleman yield?
I will.
You made one comment that I just want to hit home on again, because you said it once and you went through. This does not lessen anything. I know the gentleman from Pennsylvania was saying that if we pass this, we'll be lessening standards, we'll be going back to the way it used to be and what have you. But your point right there when you said this will not lessen anything, I think needs to be driven home. We'll just continue with the current exemption the SEC has put in place for a number of years. This will just continue with the status quo, and we'll just continue with the operation on these small businesses. I think that was...
I'm going to take back my time for a second. I think initially we understood, or previous Congresses understood, that Section 404 would probably cost companies about $75,000 to $90,000 a year, which was significant, but certainly cost-effective in terms of the value of consumer confidence, of investor confidence, of making all of us think that companies were being run properly and having outside auditors making sure they were being run properly. In fact, the costs have been 10, 11, 12 times the expectation. That burden is something we can't support for a small company.
But it's almost
$40 million. You cannot support that if you're spending $500,000 on accounting costs. Just cannot afford that and keep growing.
Would the gentleman yield?
I will.
I want to second what Mr. Adler's just said, and I don't know if the members recall this, but when we considered Sarbanes-Oxley, the SEC actually did testify before this committee and issued a report that the cost for these companies would be in the range, Mr. Adler said $75,000 to $90,000. I think it was certainly under $100,000 per company. We found out, as he correctly said, that in fact the costs were sometimes in the millions of dollars. If you're talking about a company that has a market capitalization of $75 million, and you're talking about even $500,000, that is a significant amount of money that could go into the production of goods or the delivery of services. And at a time when we have a high unemployment, the idea that we would not, I think, make permanent the exemptions on these small businesses, which are the jobs creators here in America for the great majority of jobs. And I believe that even look at from 75 million to 250 million, a study would be the prudent thing to do. And we may find that this would be a producer of jobs, and that we could do it in a safe way. And then that's what the study says. If we could do it and still protect investors consistent with maintaining investor protection.
I take back my time. I want to